So, welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. And this is part of our summer guest series. And I have a special guest with me today. Jamie is here to join me to share his expertise, share his wisdom with you. So, I'm just going to hand it over to you, Jamie. I'd love to hear what got you to being here, hanging out with me today.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you for having me. Um, yeah, so being here today is part of a ongoing journey of mine. Started with childhood trauma, abuse, growing up with depression, and eventually, which led me into the field of psychology, partially to kind of understand myself a little bit better, partially just because it was just fascinating, learning about the human mind and how it works and doesn't work and when it works and all that good stuff. And I continued along that path and ended up working in the nonprofit field for many years, starting off with children's hospitals, working with injured and ill children and their families, and then working in a domestic violence and sexual assault agency for several years, and which then led to my master's degree. And I knew going into that I wanted to specialize in trauma and somehow get current information out to people to help people, dealing with mental illness, other, emotional issues, just to kind of help people along their path, along their journey. And ended up, once I finished my master's degree, started writing a series, managing mental health. So I've got the first four published and got a few more in the deck working on. And so that's what brings me here today.
Oh yeah. Yeah, quite a list of experiences that you've been through both personally and professionally. And so thank you so much for hanging out on this podcast. Um so the listeners are often parents who are struggling with challenging behaviors. And
Mhm.
when the podcast first started out, it was an adoption podcast with
Okay.
really that focus on trauma and attachment, because that's part of my story and my family
Mhm.
is me having as mom like having a ridiculous amount of behavior management tools in my tool belt, and then adopted my son at age 5. And I knew he came to us with a tricky past, but I dove into all the certifications and all the trainings and felt so prepared. And then my son was in our family and I felt like such a failure. And nothing
Mhm.
that the psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, school counselors, like all the professionals, what they were telling me was so it wasn't working. And not
Mhm.
that you're doing anything wrong. That's
Mhm.
not what I
Right.
mean, but it was like I was missing the mark. And so I ended up
Mhm.
digging deeper to understand um what wasn't working, like why was what I was doing making everything worse. And so
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm so glad to have your expertise here to share your thoughts on trauma and parenting, and like how do we break those cycles in our own family.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. That's one that many people are still trying to answer. And it to your point, it's sometimes it's just hard. It's just difficult. There's no pill, that's going to take it away or give you an easy answer sometimes. Even when you're doing the right things, even when you're, you know, giving affection, you're, trying to raise them cognitively, emotionally, socially, all these things. Sometimes it's just hard. First of all, there's more to trauma in the sense of the effects of trauma, on childhood trauma than what we tend to think of. So, and this would be a great exercise and a great learning experience for your listeners. So, in the 90s, there was a study, it was called the ACEs study, and it's adverse childhood experiences. Go look that up. So, there's a lot to get into, a lot to unpack there. So it's good reading. You'll learn you'll learn more than what you wanted to learn. But it was basically a study that they were trying to show, was there an effect, a cause and effect between childhood trauma and adult diseases.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I mean, boom, overwhelmingly, and I mean like real stuff like cancer, diabetes,
Mhm.
even even premature death, even early aging. Um, I think on the ACEs score, like if people like had a 6 or above, something like that, their lifespan was cut short by 10 to 20 years. So
Yeah.
childhood trauma, it's not just a it's not just a mental thing. It's like, okay, I went through this experience and now I have this bad memory. It literally rewires the nervous system, which
Mhm.
causes all kinds of effects on our body, our mind, cognition, everything. So as a parent, you may see your child having certain behaviors or, certain things going on, and it may not look like a direct connection, but it's probably there somewhere. And, so I guess one of the important things is just, read as much as you can, study as much as you can, because like you said, even like with therapists or doctors, they might see you for what, 30 minutes or an hour at a time, and they're trying to help, put all these pieces together from years in that short amount of time, and they're definitely an effective tool and resource to use. Use them, use them, use them, use them, but it's not the complete picture. And some of that's going to have to come from self-discovery. Um, so breaking that cycle, I would say, first of all, is just become a student of yourself, because you can't give your child what you don't have.
Yeah.
You can try, but it's probably not going to be as impactful. It's not going to be genuine. Like myself, when my two kids were little, I was still very much in the healing phase with depression and from trauma. And there were times where I just couldn't give them the attention and the affection that they needed. And so there were times I was withdrawn from them because I was still suffering with depression. And it would come and go. And so it took years. It took years of work, to kind of get to that place. But that's the best piece of advice for breaking that cycle is be a student of yourself. The more you work on yourself and healing yourself, the more balanced energy you have to give to your children.
Oh, yeah, it's so aligned with the message that I share here with my listeners is that where I when I realized where I was going so wrong with my son is that I was doing to a T what all these experts were telling me to do. I was doing exactly, I'd read the book and I'd do the strategy,
Mhm,
but I wasn't being the mom that he needed me to be, right? I was doing these things. Meanwhile, in my mindset was so off, right? Like I was thinking and sometimes saying to my closest family and friends, like, I don't think he can be healed. And those are things that I was hearing from experts too, is that, sometimes kids with attachment difficulties can't be healed. Sometimes you
mhm.
can love, and it is the why the name of the podcast. Sometimes love isn't enough.
Yeah.
Because those are the words that I would hear from the experts. It's like love can't fix him. And and I agree that love alone can't fix trauma,
Mhm,
but I thought that strategies, more therapy, more diagnoses, more things outside of me were what he needed. But when
mhm,
really he needed exactly as you said, he needed me
mhm,
to trust my gut. And because there are times when his behaviors were so atrocious. And my mind was like, okay, so this is a strategy I need to use. But my gut was like, but just give him a hug. But my mind
uh-huh,
is like, no, 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 that's giving attention to a negative behavior. That's what you've learned about behavior management. And my gut is like,
mhm.
no, 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 give him a hug. And my head is like, we're not giving a hug right now. That's going to like create a monster.
Yes.
Right. And it was that disconnect of, you're right, me tapping into me and trusting
Uh-huh,
me was what he needed. But I
uh-huh.
didn't learn that till um, until our relationship was very broken.
Mhm,
And it is now back on track and we have a lovely relationship now. But it took me really understanding that concept, like you said. It's about going in, not more out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a couple of things there. So one, that's so I have a whole separate dictionary of terms for what I'm thinking, but it's so messed up that someone would tell you that someone can't be healed. One of the best things I think that we've learned recently, and I say, in the past decade or so, that as studies have come along and the science has come along in psychology, is that neuroplasticity. So the same thing that trauma does to the brain when a child is young in terms of redirecting it in a bad way, we have that throughout our lifetime, but we can do it the opposite way too. It's like when you have an adult that is struggling with an addiction of some sort, substance use disorder, and they one of the keys is not just taking away the bad thing, it's replacing it with something good. And that
Mhm.
starts rewiring the brain and the nervous system. Now, obviously, the older we get, the longer it takes because, our cells aren't reproducing as quickly, but it's still possible. So when you
Yeah,
have a child like that and someone says to you, well, they can't be healed, that's BS. Yes, they can. Yes, they
yeah,
can. Now, like anything else, it takes time, but that's okay. That's what we're here for, right? That's
yeah,
life.
yeah,
Everything in life we do just takes time, but it can be done. And especially with an attachment issue, the attachment issue needs to be corrected. It needs to be brought back to a norm, and that norm is affection. That norm is support. The one piece that I think um, a lot of experts have left out in a sense, or maybe it just hasn't gotten enough coverage and teaching, and that is resilience. Teaching our kids resilience because that's what's going to give them self-confidence to handle situations in the future, good and bad. That's what's going to take them through challenges in life. Uh, you know, and it helps teach them not to take failure and put it on themselves. So teaching resilience, I think, is one of the strongest keys in terms of parenting as we go along.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny. It's funny because you're from a very specific field of psychology, and I'm a coach. But so much of what I do with my clients is so in line with what you're talking about. One of the core elements of the work that I do here in my podcast, but then also with my clients, is I was trained to use the 9 resiliency keys,
Mm,
and um, and and to use maybe a slightly different definition of trauma than what I had learned when my son, that was really when I dove into trauma, was because of my son, and well, and wanting to become a foster parent at the time. And so the definition that I had learned about trauma was more complex. And now I really look at it as any experience that has caused us to question our sense of lovability, our sense of self-worth, and our right
mhm.
place in the world.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah. And when I look at life through that lens now, and it's like, that's why myself or people that I love get so stuck on, like, they can't move forward from something because either they're questioning their lovability because of that incident, or they're questioning their self-worth, or whether or not they belong where they are. And
Mhm,
that belonging was so key. I think that's a common thread through adoption, right? It's I hear that a lot about our kids just feeling like they don't belong. They don't belong
mhm.
anywhere.
Yep.
And I still see that in my son. He's 19 now, and um, he's he's decided that he feels most aligned when he's doing work. He does like the door to door, like selling people roofs and windows. He loves the work. He loves tapping into that salesman skill set, which when he was little, it seemed problematic, but he's great at it.
Yeah.
But I think that that's so aligned with him because he doesn't really know where home is. He doesn't have that
Mhm,
sense of belonging anywhere yet. And I think
mhm.
he's still trying to find that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
oh,
amazing. I just a quick what you're talking about is like that sense of self, as far as what trauma does to it. And I mentioned the ACEs scale and that study. So there's really three sections on that. One is abuse, makes sense, right?
mhm.
One is neglect, that makes sense too. The third section is household dysfunction.
Yeah.
Even things like if a child has had a parent that's in prison, and that's
Mhm.
exactly why. It's because it's not that the parent is there abusing them, it's
Mhm.
because it reflects on their sense of love, being wanted.
Mhm.
You don't have to tell them verbatim, "Hey, I don't want you." It's
Yeah.
this person that is supposed to be my emotional connection, that is supposed to be my safety, my security, my provider, not just physically but emotionally, is not here. They're just not here. So
Yeah.
therefore I'm, left wanting.
Yeah.
And it does exactly what you said. It gives them that sense of just not belonging, a sense of not being wanted or not being loved.
Yeah. Yeah. Because kids tell that story of like, if I would have just been better behaved,
Hmm.
mom or dad wouldn't be off at prison or they wouldn't have gotten
Hmm.
divorced or those are the stories that kids tell about their experience. If I would have just been better, they
Hmm.
would love me more.
Yep.
It's how we're wired, which
Yeah.
yeah, creates such a tricky spot. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I actually hadn't thought about the ACEs for a while until you had brought it back into my awareness in this past week as we connected. But it's so true that what we experience and I now, as I work with clients, I think there's so many other things the ACEs could look at because I think,
Hmm.
that was looking at our early childhood experiences, but
Yeah.
which is where we're the most, those first 7 years matter so much.
Yep. Yep.
But there are also things that happen, and I always wonder, like I'd kind of shared on my podcast, but last year I was in an awful car wreck and it was
Mm.
terrifying, and my body held on to that experience for a while, and I ended up using some somatic
Mm.
EFT tapping to release that trauma.
Yeah.
And right, I'm well past the age of 7. So,
Yeah.
I wonder like, was my body holding on to that because of what I experienced in those first 7 years? Not that I expect you to know the answer, but it's those
Uh-huh.
things that I think about that I think our early childhood experiences are so impactful to the way that we process information, the way
Uh-huh.
we hold stories about ourselves.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And trauma, even in adulthood, trauma has a similar effect. Not necessarily the rewiring of the neural pathways to that extent. Now, if it's ongoing trauma, like let's say you're and I've worked with people like, from domestic violence, and if they're in a abusive relationship for years, then yeah, absolutely, it's their brains are totally rewired. They're just different. But in the body, your body stores it because we're made to have a immediate response to trauma. So like if you're walking, you see a bear in the woods, your body instantly says, run, get the hell out. you know, that's what we're made to do. It happens before you can even think about it. That's what it's made to do. But if it's such a traumatic experience, your body releases those hormones and neurotransmitters and things like that in your body, adrenaline, cortisol, that good stuff. It can literally be like pressing the gas pedal on a car and it getting stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So those chemicals flood your body and your system just kind of gets stuck. And now you've got too much of those in your body for a long time and starts breaking down, parts of your body, makes you physically ill, has effects mentally and emotionally. So yeah, trauma, it some of the same effects, but a lot more a lot more immediate physical response for an
Yeah.
adult than a child. Child, it's in the body and just slowly, slowly is deteriorating the systems of the body, like the immunity system and the digestive system, over years and years until they start having problems in adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that analogy of the bear, I remember back when things were so tricky in my home, I remember describing to somebody, it's as if my son views me as the bear. And I'm not
Mm,
doing anything, like I'm trying to connect with him. I'm trying to, be, I have a pretty calm, comforting personality most of the time. I'm not a reactive mom, but
mhm,
he reacted to me like I was a bear. And,
mhm,
that like quick fight or flight response in my son, and it didn't seem to matter what I was doing. And I see this come up so often with the clients that I work with who are raising kids who come from a tricky past. And they'll say to me, but my son was so calm. And then I said this one little thing and they just blew up at me. And so I've tried to explain exactly as you did. Like, yeah, it's kind of, I love that gas pedal analogy. I've explained like it's kind of like they're in that fight or flight response all the time. And they're just
yep,
like, wait, it's like they're walking down a dark alley and they're just hyper vigilant, waiting for something to jump
mhm,
out at them. And so any
mhm,
little move of a squirrel or whatever it is, they're like, ah, and
yep,
they, respond accordingly. So I love
mhm,
that gas pedal analogy to help kind of bring that home.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, and that's the fight or flight, and that's what that is, your body releases those hormones to respond to a real or perceived danger, and it's just in childhood, being abandoned is a real or perceived danger.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
think we think as adults, well, they're out of that bad situation now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, but their nervous system is still telling them you're going to be abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's worse than physical abuse. Children can recover from physical abuse quicker than they can from abandonment.
Yeah.
You know, that's how serious it is and how you just in trying to navigate those issues, you just need to be aware of it so that, like you said, you say something and all of a sudden there's this response. It doesn't match the situation, but you're just, okay, yep, yep, I know that. It's not going to fix it right in that moment, but at least it kind of keeps you from having your own response. You can kind of take a step back and be like, okay, this is normal for the situation we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So it gives you a
Yeah.
chance to kind of, you know, plan out more effectively how you're going to handle the situation, handle working with that child that's been through something.
Yeah. Those are the things that when as mom, I knew, right? Like I knew that I'd heard all the experts talk about that and my brain knew that, right? Like of course he's reacting this way. He's been through so much.
Hmm.
But over time, in those moments, my body started to have its own physiological reaction to my son, which made it harder and harder and
Hmm.
harder for me myself to do exactly as you're describing. And
Hmm.
that is a common theme that I see in the clients that I work with is that like they know what they're supposed to do, but then their child does what their child does. And parents become, despite like trying to do the work, they become more and more reactive. Do you have
Mm.
any tips for ways that they can help um, regulate their own nervous system so that they can show up for their kids?
Sure. Like you mentioned earlier, somatic exercises are one of the best ways to help regulate the nervous system, especially if you've been through trauma or if you're just in a high stress environment. Maybe it's not to the level of what you would consider, an immediate trauma, um, but just high stress, somatic exercises like yoga, walking, walking. It's the freest and easiest, exercise you can get. Because again, we're talking about when you're having that response, that's a bodily response, not just mental. So you
Yeah,
can't just talk yourself out of it all the
yeah,
time. There are times when you can, there are times when you can be like, okay, I see this is going on and I just need to, process this and whatever. And that's great if you have the time to do that. And that's a tool that you should learn because you can use it, but you don't always have that, and so you've got to work on your health, your overall health, the holistic, journey. Take it, your health, your physical health, your diet, all those things will help your body do what it's supposed to do and not, spiral out of control. So yeah, somatic exercise is the best. My other very, very, very practical tip and advice that I've been doing myself for years and years and years, and that's journaling. And journaling is not just, diary writing where you just say, hey, today's just, June, whatever, and here's what happened and blah, blah, blah. Journaling is taking a few minutes, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, and saying, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I think, here's my reflection on that. And even finding something that has prompts that will help you dig deeper into yourself. And especially with your children, it gives you an opportunity to not only be a student of yourself, but be a student of them. You can
Yeah.
write down their triggers. Okay, here's what happened. I said this, and they had a reaction. And you can start over a few weeks or months, you can start looking at those and being like, okay, I see a pattern here. So this issue is causing a response. So there's something there. Let
Yeah.
me let me let me observe and figure out, what's going on here. So journaling is the best. I swear it's the best tool out of everything, I think. And I'm biased, but yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I've been using it for years. It absolutely helped me in self-discovery and seeing my own issues and helping me chart a path in dealing with them and healing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love that, that they're so practical. And I one strategy that I suggest as I am teaching people about EFT is actually to combine both of them. So I tell them
Mm,
journal a list of all of your yuck, all the things that pop up into your head, like, oh, that time that, mom lost me at the grocery store, or the time that, Susie stole my boyfriend, or, like whatever
mhm,
those things might be, and just write it down. And you don't have to write the whole story, but then that becomes your tapping list, the things that you kind of pluck through. Because if
uh-huh.
you're still thinking about it at 30, 40, 50 some odd years old, it's still trapped somewhere in your body.
Yes.
If you're still thinking about it and you think about it as problematic, then let it go. And so I combine both, that I don't journal out the whole experience,
Right.
but I
Yep.
write it down as kind of like a to-do list. I
Yeah,
do,
yeah, yeah.
like
Like
I said,
bullet
I like
points. Yeah.
practical. I like simple and
Uh-huh.
practical.
Uh-huh.
And
That's
so
and
then,
that's
yeah.
that's very much what EMDR is. So the
Hmm.
eye movement desensitization, and I always forget the R. Jeez. But anyways, whatever. It that's one of the reasons it's been so effective with PTSD is because you have something that's somatic, person's
Hmm.
following the pen, the light, whatever, while they're recalling this traumatic experience, even if it's just one piece of it. And that's what
Yeah.
that is. It's not like you're going through the whole story, but you're taking one part. And it's just rebalancing your nervous system. It's
Yeah.
taking it's lessening the emotional response to an incident. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's exactly what that is. Same type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I had kind of shared with you, but I do focus a ton on human design and
Uh,
all the, like, how that is a blueprint of our energy, the energy that we hold. And when I first started learning about tapping, that it was taking, like, our emotions are held in our energy.
mm,
And then we have these thoughts, and it's when the two of them are so interwoven that's when our body is like, let me hold on to that in, like, a
uh-huh.
knee problem for the rest of your life, or
Yeah.
that's or digestive issues or whatever it might be. It's the
Hmm.
the emotional energy so interwoven with those thoughts. That's what creates the problem,
Hmm.
is that, using these tools to let that go, whether it's something like EMDR or tapping, whatever your strategy is. I know we're all so unique and we need different things, but I like that idea of doing something to get it out of us, and doing and not but we can't just talk everything out, right? Like you
Right.
said, like sometimes we need some of that
Yes.
holistic help to get out of our own way.
Hmm.
So that was really cool. Anything else that you want to make sure that you share with my listeners here about the work that you do or how you support patients, clients?
Um, yeah, I would say, and again, I keep reiterating this, but education is the keys, and I mean self-education, whether it's yourself, whether it's your child, your relationships, just dig in, make some time, be intentional about it, and learn as much as you can and learn from different perspectives. Because like you just touched on, what's more beneficial for me might not be as beneficial for you. It might be a good thing, it's a good idea, but that might not be what you need in this moment. Um, and what you need changes over time too.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get caught up, and especially as parents, I still look back and and I can pinpoint certain things when my kids were young and think, dang, I really screwed up when I did this or didn't do that or I had this reaction, you know. And we have to kind of have a little bit of forgiveness for ourselves as parents because it's not like when you have a child, you just sign a contract and all of a sudden you're a perfect adult and you know everything
Mm.
and blah, blah, blah. You don't. You're still growing and learning yourself. So have some forgiveness and know that it's part of the process and that the more you can learn, the more you can understand, more you can see what is going on. And once you do that, then you kind of have the freedom to go by your good instincts, like you mentioned earlier. It kind of releases, it kind of frees you to say, "Oh, okay, yes, let me dive into this, and this is healthy, and this is not." And so it gives you that opportunity to just be more of yourself um, instead of just taking one piece of advice and saying, okay, that's the only answer, and I must be failing because I'm not doing that one thing.
Yeah.
Um, there's just so much more, you know, almost like eating a healthy diet. You don't just eat carrots, you know, you eat a range, a variety, and the same way with our experiences in learning ourselves and learning our children. Look at the whole picture. Learn as much as you can and apply as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what I was thinking as you were talking too is that I hear, from my friends, myself, from others that oftentimes when we're trying to figure out how to be a parent, it's almost like our primary goal in parenting is to not parent like we were parented. But
Mm-hmm.
but the parent that we are isn't the polar opposite of how we were parented, right? The parent that we are is is unique to us and true to what you said, right? Like this expert might say this is the best strategy, and then we try to do it and we fail because it's not in line with who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're like oftentimes fighting against how we were parented, even when we were parented good,
Yeah.
whatever that is. We
Uh-huh.
often are fighting against that. And I just love what you said about it. It is about trusting yourself. And
Mhm.
yes, understanding the strategies, trying to do things differently, but then at the end of the day, it's about like taking note about what worked for me, what worked for my kids, what works in our dynamic together.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool. So if for my listeners who want to connect further with you, where can they find you, or are you offering anything? Like how can they connect with you?
Sure. So my website is managingmentalhealth.net. Right now I just finished publishing a managing mental health journal, which has 50 guided prompts in it, plus a whole other section on additional exercises people can do. So if you go to my website right now, you can get that for free. It downloads as a PDF, so you can use it, on your computer, or you can print it out however you'd like, but it's there. And also on my website are the links to the 4 books that I have out right now, which are each on different mental health issues, depression, clinical depression, anxiety, adult ADHD, and PTSD. And these are all very practical guides. In other words, what people you learn about it, and then here's steps that you can take to either start your journey of healing, things that you can do like right now to kind of
Yeah.
lower symptoms, but then also um, plan a course forward in long-term healing. Um, and it's good for people that are dealing with those issues themselves, but it's also great for loved ones, family members, because they can read these and understand, "Oh, okay, this makes sense why, my child or my husband or wife or whoever kind of has these odd habits or these down times or whatever, you know. So it's really good resource. And then people can connect with me on there too, on the website in terms of reaching out through email or social media.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. And I love that resource is so perfectly aligned with what we were talking about here today, right? About some structured journaling to really reconnect with ourselves. So I think that's
Hmm.
awesome that you're sharing that with the listeners. So thank you for doing that. And thank you so much for hanging out here today on Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I'm so grateful that you gave us your time.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.